People like to invent monsters and monstrosities. Then they seem less monstrous themselves. When they get blind drunk, cheat, steal, beat their wives, starve an old woman, when they kill a trapped fox with an axe or riddle the last existing unicorn with arrows, they like to think that the Bane entering cottages at daybreak is more monstrous than they are. They feel better then. They find it easier to live. It's quite easy to delude yourself into imagining you have a clear conscience, especially when you can so simply pile all of your disdain on someone or something that looks different to you. White of hair, with cat-like eyes, why not attribute all the evil of the world to them? As a witcher, Geralt of Rivia is no stranger to folks narrowing their eyes, spitting in his direction, or peppering him with derision. That's all part of the profession. A tax that's entirely unavoidable whenever he offers his service to paying clients. Many would become embittered by this reception from the populace. The masses may not know they are prodding a hissing snake when they hurl their insults, but the witchers know better. With exceptionally increased speed, strength, reflexes and endurance, as well as an array of deadly magics and 2 sharpened, adeptly wielded blades, if a witcher could not take spiteful comments in his stride, there would be a million murdered commoners littering the streets. In that regard, you could argue that the willingness of folk to insult witchers is a testament to the discipline and character of the witchers. Through the piercing amber eyes of Geralt, we see this demonstrated time and time again. He's always the subject of ridicule, judged as a mutant freak, yet he does not retaliate, no matter how bigoted the heckler may be. It is his profoundly difficult duty to attempt to do the right thing, despite knowing that his efforts will never ever be acknowledged by anyone. That is what it means to be a witcher, and that is what it means to be Geralt of Rivia. Hey guys, it's Drew here, and I'm excited to be bringing you a new installment to my Witcher series. I know they've been few and far between, but what better way to show the series some love than by talking about the quintessential character of the universe. I could go through his lore for hours, as he is the protagonist present throughout almost everything. But rather than making a several-hour video, I think it will be better to focus on different facets of his character individually. I'm going to start off with what I believe to be the most important aspect of Geralt, the trait that separates him from the perception that he's little more than a coin-hungry killer. One of his most well-known and most ironic aliases is the Butcher of Blaviken, and in this video I aim to show you why this name is a tragic injustice that fundamentally contradicts who Geralt is beneath his mutated visage. So let's begin by getting to know a little bit more about the character of Geralt, and how he eventually earned his nickname. Geralt was the child of a powerful sorceress named Vicenna and a fierce warrior named Corin. At an early age, Vicenna gave him to the School of the Wolf in Kaer Morhen. Much to the surprise of those he shares this fact with, Geralt was not abandoned by a poverty-stricken mother, nor was he the subject of the Law of Surprise, being plucked away from a grieving woman. Geralt endured the many Witcher trials, including the Trial of the Grasses, the Trial of the Dreams, and the Trial of the Mountains. He was even subjected to an unprecedented additional trial due to his remarkable resilience. This one is responsible for giving him his distinct white hair. While some witchers could go unnoticed by avoiding eye contact with common folk, Geralt's hair was immediately recognisable to most prospective hecklers. The loss of pigment in his hair was not the only side effect of the rigorous trials. He was granted a lifetime of foul memories, as well as an excuse for his withdrawn nature. If you've heard the rumour that the trials rid witchers of their capacity for emotion, well, Geralt is a big supporter of that misconception. He believes that an apathetic approach to most situations frees him from the obligation of showing his emotions, which are, contrary to popular belief, absolutely there. He seems cynical and even hostile, but despite his outwardly cold nature, Dandelion notes that behind his exterior hides a fiercely loyal friend, a man of good humour, and someone not indifferent to suffering. This is incredibly significant to his character, for if he were any of the things people perceive him to be, Geralt truly would be a monster. Geralt and his fellow witchers must be good people at heart, else they would be lost, and the world would be a much darker place. A conversation with the elf Filavandrel in the book titled The Last Wish gives a good idea of why Geralt adopts this uncaring facade. He says, "I manage because I have to, because I've no other way out, because I've overcome the vanity and pride of being different. I've understood that they are a pitiful defense against being different. Were Geralt to become embittered by the cruel words of the masses, he would be the monster that they say he is. Instead, he let go of his vanity and pride, and reserves his true emotions for those people who matter to him, and those people alone. Geralt is also a master at alleviating the tension from dire situations, and he will always attempt to end conflicts peacefully, without bloodshed. But with this in mind, how then did he become known as the Butcher of Blaviken? Well, the life of a Witcher is full of choices and dilemmas, and sometimes there is no right answer. When dealing with humans especially, evil cannot be trumped by good intentions. Geralt is known for saying the following: "If I'm to choose between one evil or another, I'd rather not choose at all." But when does a man choose to stay out of it, and when is he obliged to act? Is there not a time when not intervening to stop evil can be just as bad as the evil itself? In the short story titled The Lesser Evil, Geralt is given an impossible choice. He's subsequently blamed for the monstrous nature of two others. In this tale, the Princess Renfri has a bone to pick with the wizard Stregobor, who is seeking refuge within his tower. Renfri cannot get him to leave the safety of his tower, so she is desperate. First, she asks Geralt to act on her behalf, for it is the lesser of two evils. On the other hand, Stregobor asks him to deal with Renfri, as he claims that it is in fact the lesser of two evils. But when he declines both requests, Renfri seeks a more drastic means of goading the wizard from his tower. A local mage is duty-bound to do whatever he can to protect the town, so Renfri planned to massacre the people in the market square until Stregobor showed himself. Stregobor ignored the ultimatum, and Renfri was going to call his bluff, sticking true to her word. To save the unsuspecting townsfolk from Renfri's goons, Geralt rushes to the market square, confronting the conspirators. To avoid risking any innocent lives, he engages them in combat, deflecting a crossbow bolt with a swift flick of his blade before cutting down the bandits. When Renfri returns, with the news that Stregobor told her to do what she would to the innocents, instead of facing her himself, Geralt was forced to kill her as well. Stregobor's cowardly sacrifice of the townsfolk was one evil, just as Renfri's plot was a bigger one. But in fending off evil, Geralt's lasting achievement was the disdain of those who he'd just rescued, and the title of Butcher for his savagery. The profession of Witcher will always be a thankless job, as it's far simpler for men to find a scapegoat for their cruelty than it is to face their flaws and take personal responsibility. Geralt's many travails seem terribly tragic when we see the world with his eyes. He travels across the continent, usually alone, risking his life constantly in service to a population who will never accept nor appreciate him. The people love to idolise chivalrous heroes, for they fight monsters for the sole purpose of protecting the helpless. To them, witches are a bastardised mockery of knights. They demand gold for their bravery, and will kill anything for money. But the irony is, this couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, the fables tell of gallant knights, and they certainly exist in some places, like Toussaint, the land of chivalry and wine. But oftentimes, knights will sacrifice their morals at the altar of fame, killing creatures simply because they look scary. They don't understand that creatures and non-humans aren't synonymous with monsters. It takes a witcher to make that distinction. Let me elaborate on that by talking about dragons, the one creature that witchers famously refuse to slay. This seems like the ultimate contrast between knights and witchers. In the short story titled The Bounds of Reason, Geralt says when in conversation with Yen, "Dragons aren't man's enemies." The sorceress looked at him and smiled, but only with her lips. "In that matter," she said, "leave the judging to us humans. Your role, Witcher, is not to judge, it's to get the job done." "Like a programmed servile golem," he said. "That was your comparison, not mine," Yennefer replied coldly. "But well, it's apt." Later in the same story, Geralt expands on his previous claim, offering a justification for his sentiment despite the insistence from those around him that he's not capable of critical thought, only mindless slaughter. He says, "If dragons didn't have treasure hoards, not a soul would be interested in them, and certainly not sorcerers." Isn't it interesting that whenever a dragon is being hunted, some sorcerer closely linked to the Goldsmiths Guild is always hanging around, just like you, Yennefer. And later, although a deal of gemstones ought to end up on the market, it never happens, and their price doesn't go down. So don't talk to me about vacation and the fight for the survival of the race. Why is it that witchers, paid monster slayers, have exceptions? Why would they discriminate against their targets? Well, for Geralt, it is the only way he could live with himself and reconcile his grisly occupation. When the hordes of men and mages hunt down the dragons in search of gold and glory, it takes a freak to see them for what they really are, posturing liars with feigned valour. They don't hunt dragons for the good of humanity, they do it for their own selfish interests, as humans always do. To these hypocrites, Geralt is the caricature of a monstrous mutated man, yet being so vastly different to them gives him the perspective to see their flaws through their flimsy disguise of normalcy. This serves as a good example of why Geralt is constantly seen travelling with hardly a penny to his name. Yes, the abundance of monsters in the world is dwindling, but don't be mistaken because there will always be work available to a trained killer. For a witcher like Geralt, there is more nuance to his lacking finances, and he will turn down a heavy purse if his client wants a brute, or a murderer, or a monster. A corrupted man with a steady supply of gold and a sharpened sword is a devastating weapon, but a man with morals, who cannot be swayed by the glimmer of gemstones or the clink of gold coins, he's the great equalizer. He's the force of good in a society that loves to claim moral superiority unjustly. When the golden dragon, villain Trettenmirth, reveals himself to Geralt, Yennefer and Dandelion, he says, "For some time, creatures, which you usually call monsters, have been feeling more and more under threat from people. They can no longer cope by themselves. They need a defender, some kind of witcher. A knight may boldly claim to fight purely for the safety of humans, but a witcher, Geralt being the perfect example, will fight for good and against evil, without assuming that the monster is inherently the creature, and the victim is inherently the human. It makes complete sense to me why Geralt may feel terribly lonely on the Witcher's path. He cannot always command the respect of human society, but to be graced with the love and respect of a golden dragon, and to serve a concept more profound than human society seems capable of comprehending, well, that's worth all the insults, and all the nights spent sleeping in the dirt when you can't afford a room. I'll leave you with one final quote that aptly summarises the topic of the video, and the morality of Geralt. In the outskirts of Vizima, the witch Abigail said to Geralt, "I heard witches carry two swords, a silver blade for monsters and steel for humans." To which Geralt responded, "Both are for monsters." And there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Drew, and I'll see you next time.